Well, last time we wrapped up Second Timothy. It took a little bit of forever to get there, but we did get there. And so now I'm thinking, all right, where do we go now? And honestly, this is a kind of thing where I wish I was like some of my friends who have told me, well, the Lord told me. Uh, this, and I'm sure this is probably because of me, but I asked, so what do we do next? And kind of got crickets. Then I pondered it and thought, I never worked from a narrative book, none of the Gospels or the book of Acts. And I thought, I love Acts. It's full of good stuff. So what I'd like to do is, I can't even say how long this will take because the book of Acts is a long book. But I'd like for us to wander through. Actually, let's not wander. Let's just walk through the book of Acts. And I'd like to approach it with two questions. And the two questions are, what happened? And then there's some sub-questions under that. And then the second question is, what might that mean for us? I don't have any illusions that I'm going to be able to rock your world with the study of the book of Acts. However, I will say what happened in the book of Acts rocked the world. And there's a sense in which I feel like in my own life and in our world today, maybe if we got back to the truths that we see demonstrated in the book of Acts, just maybe we could rock the world. Oh, okay. I found a really helpful thing in the U version of the Bible. It's an introduction, a very brief, concise introduction to the book of Acts, and I think it's worth looking at so that we can move into the book of Acts. And here's where it starts. Acts is the second book that Dr. Luke wrote. The first book was what we have today as the Gospel of Luke. And the second book, the book of Acts, it was not named or titled by Luke. It actually was in the form of a communication from Luke to what we can assume was a good friend, or at the very least, a significant person in Luke's life. We're going to look at that, what the relationship might have been, and how thinking more about Luke as a person. But looking at the whole book, it's basically, you can look at it as a 6-part play or movie or narrative. There's way more than 6 chapters, but the book of Acts describes the growth of the church. It's been titled by, many centuries ago as the Acts of the Apostles, and we shorten it to the book of Acts. These Acts of the Apostles describe a process of development of the church and the expansion of the church into the world. First section is about the church being formed in Jerusalem. This introduction, I just want to read you this. These sections are all marked by variations on the phrase, "The Word of God continued to spread and flourish." It's a narrative, a biography of the beginning of the church. The first one, as I said, is about the establishment of the church in Jerusalem and its infancy there. One of the things that happened was it began to put down roots and it began to loosely organize itself. And then the second movement pushes it out into the rest of Palestine. I didn't ever used to care anything about Bible geography. I mean, it's just, it's the Holy Land. You may want to consult a map and see that Jerusalem was the primary substantial city in Israel. And it's not centrally located, but it was the center of Jewish life and thought. From that center, because people began to move into other parts of Palestine. And then, our brother Peter gets a direct word from God that the Gentiles, now the message is to go to the Gentiles. And when that happened, the world of the church began to expand almost explosively. And Gentiles were included in God's work, the expansion of his church. Okay. The fourth section, Paul and his traveling companions took the message to Gentiles and over into Asia Minor. You have to bear in mind, in that day, the known world, still China and what we think of as the Far East, was unknown. Anyway, the known world really was all around the Mediterranean Sea. And Paul and his companions went out from the principal early locations of the church in Palestine into Asia Minor. And that we have, like, what is today Turkey, was considered Asia in Paul's day. And then the fifth was that he and his companions traveled to Europe. One of the big places in Europe that they went was Athens. Athens, we'll talk about it, but Athens was and is today, it's on my bucket list, haven't been there, but in my studies, it's clear. Athens was a city of huge importance and a center of thought in Paul's world. And then the last section, the sixth section, is where Paul travels to Rome, to the capital city of the empire. So we're going to be looking at this big narrative, a huge story. Okay. When I use the term story, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. This is the story of the development and expansion of the church in the first century, but it's not a made-up story. This is the narrative of the actual events and people and places that are involved in the first century expansion of the church. And let's look at how Luke starts this treatise or book. Acts chapter 1, verse 1. In my former book, Theophilus, I wrote about all that Jesus began to do and to teach until the day he was taken up to heaven. Okay. I don't know, we might, I can't even imagine we'll get through the book of Acts before Jesus returns, but if we do, we may go back to the book of Luke and walk through it in this similar kind of way. But Luke and Theophilus had a relationship which is unspecified. But let's look at the book, how he starts the book of Luke. He says, many have undertaken, this is Luke 1:1, many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the first were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. And then this kind of gives you a little bit of insight into the relationship. In verse 3, it says, with this in mind, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the certainty of the things you have been taught. Noble Theophilus. Now, excellent Theophilus. I guess I'd say it's entirely possible that when Luke addressed him as excellent Theophilus, he was just saying, my man, you're, my bestie, maybe. I don't think that. I do think he had, for purposes that we don't even know, he had a very high esteem for Theophilus. From what we get in Luke 1, we know that Theophilus was a believer and a follower of Jesus, and Luke wanted to provide him with ways and means to grow and strengthen his faith, his belief in Jesus. So that's really all we know about Theophilus. He appears twice in the very beginning of Gospel of Luke and here in the very beginning of the book of Acts. I wish there was a way for us to know how did they get connected? What was the nature of their connection and relationship? But there isn't a way that I know of. I think anybody who tells you, well, I know how that all happened, basically what they're saying is, I have drawn some conclusions and I have a theory that I like. I don't even have a theory. I just know Luke valued Theophilus to the degree that he went to the trouble of researching and writing the narrative of the beginning of the church. And oh, by the way, he didn't just research and write about it, he participated as well. And we'll come to that, well, a good bit later in the book of Acts. For now, my time's up, so I'm going to close out and see you next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.